Jon, you're very welcome to the ScaleX Insider podcast. Delighted and thrilled to have you on the show today.
Thanks ever so much for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah, you're very, very welcome. I'm really excited about this conversation today. It's one of my favorite topics. But before we get into that, our vision is to inspire, connect, and enable millions of ambitious leaders of small and medium-sized enterprises to scale with purpose. So, Jon, what does scaling with purpose mean to you?
Well, I like the word purpose. Purpose calls to me because I think scaling with meaning would be about personal importance, what is important to you. But scaling with purpose is really about connection with other people. Purpose is about the bigger picture. So I think that is the key starting point where I think, that conversation around what can we do together, collaboration is going to be really key in scaling. I think having that partnership and also those conversations is really centered around purpose. So for me, scaling with purpose really is about going bigger than you and grabbing a t-shirt beside yourself and saying, let's do it together and making a big impact and a bigger change.
I love that. Going bigger than you. We've never had that in more than 100 episodes yet. It's simple but profound. In terms of going bigger than you, your work fascinates me. I first came across it in HBR some time ago. After you wrote The Choice Point, your wonderful book. For those who aren't aware of Jon Rhodes, can you share a little bit of your journey into the science of goal setting and I suppose why you've devoted your career to this?
Yeah, of course. So Joanna Grover and I wrote The Choice Point, and we've been doing quite a lot of work for the last about 3 years or so. My background is in academia, so I'm based out of the University of Plymouth in the UK, and yeah, I suppose my research is really focused around motivation, what motivates individuals to do certain things, but also this idea of mindset. And I think for me, I'm sure we'll talk about it later, but the idea that mindset is hugely overrated, and we need to really focus on actions and implementations. But I'll park that there for the time being. So my background is really research as an academic and a lecturer and a supervisor of projects, and I suppose that when COVID happened, a lot of individuals thinking, what's next? What should we do? When the world almost stopped, I started collaborating with Joanna in the US, and we started working with organizations because everyone was on Zoom. So it was fairly straightforward for us to work with organizations who were ultimately overworked. Some of them were burnt out. I'm not sure if I can use that word, but yes, they were absolutely struggling. Struggling is probably where people are also now with the current state of affairs in the market, and also people do struggle, and also thinking about it in teams as well. So how can we work within teams together, and how can we scale this idea that's kind of been housed in academic research around understanding motivation, and really the work is around motivation but imagery. So how you are using your imagination to start planning to achieve these big lofty goals. Now, also just to say, when you have a goal, whoever you are, wherever you are, you will imagine it. And I'm guessing the majority of listeners have never had an imagination coach that's coached you to use your imagination and your abilities to use multi-sensory imagery to explore your goals. And that's generally what we do with teams. We focus on their why, their purpose, looking at how their purpose is hugely important to them as individuals, but also to their collective team as well. We look at purpose based on community-based interventions. How's it going to impact people beyond your organization? And then we look at imagery training as well. So we support people to use their imagination in a very effective way, a methodical way, a hugely research-backed way, and ultimately, what we see is a huge return on investment. We see happy people. I know, happy employees, crazy, who enjoy what they're doing, who feel more connected, who feel more part of the process and how you're working on these tricky, struggling-based goals. And that's kind of how we worked. And again, we worked with huge companies. We worked with we worked with the IBMs, etc. And we've also worked with smaller companies. We are a small company ourselves, and we're scaling because ultimately for us, it's two individuals who are now saying, well, how do we go big? And that's kind of where the book came in, where our online courses have come in, and where a lot of our coaching and how we've expanded our coaching portfolio has come in as well thinking, how can we go bigger? How can we support others?
Well done, you. Well, this is part of that as well. You know, we're going to aim to have this podcast reach as many people as we possibly can and share your wonderful work. You've spoken there, likely not intentionally, but to the three first principles of our ScaleX framework, which is psyche, purpose and vision, which is the second principle, and people, inspiring people around the image which you have created, the wonderful vision that you've created by leveraging your imagination. And it always fascinates me, some of the research that I learned some years ago, is that our imagination is the single highest mental faculty that distinguishes us between all other mammals. You don't have birds outside there kind of wondering what they're going to do today to make an impact in the world. Their automatic success mechanism, which is about feeding themselves, is already built in. Before we get into all of that, I mentioned I came across your work initially on a HBR article entitled How to Overcome Self-Limiting Beliefs. And I love this topic. I love it because when you talk about motivation, just to share with you the context, there are 5.7 million small and medium-sized enterprises in the UK, and long-time listeners of this show know that I cite this stat quite often. There's 400 million small and medium-sized businesses across the globe, but 5.7 million in the UK. And the latest statistics, the most recent statistics, suggest that only 0.5% of those businesses are actually achieving scale, despite the fact that those 5.7 million are contributing over £2 trillion worth of revenue to the UK economy, and half of that is coming from those scaling SMEs. I think it's less than 30,000 now. And lack of ambition of the leader is cited as the single greatest impediment as to why companies don't scale. So we could take that, just playing with words, lack of ambition being lack of motivation. And what you're saying and what your work speaks to is the fact that there's a way to become motivated. And I'd love to get into that today. But just in this the context of overcoming self-limiting beliefs, before we get into that, for those who are hearing this term self-limiting beliefs, and I suspect that there's not many that haven't heard it before, but can you just explain what limiting beliefs are, and in the context of the leaders listening, how it might show up for them in their thoughts, in their words, in their actions?
Of course, yeah. So a self-limiting belief really is an outlook on how you perceive the future, and usually it's a negative way. So you may hear people say things like, I'm not cut out for this. It's not like me to be able to manage this, whatever. Maybe I'm not good enough. You might hear that. Or I'm a follower, not a leader. So you could actually have, you could have heard these things in yourself. Maybe it's your internal monologue going on saying, I can't do certain things. And that's normal. Right? These are spontaneous thoughts. We don't really get a say in these spontaneous thoughts. They just come into our head. And they muster around, and really it's about how long we spend with this thought. That's the key point. How long do you spend giving attention, or we call it elaboration in research, elaborating on this negativity? Now, it could be pretty fleeting. You could come in and say, I'm not a follower, I'm a leader. And then you can change this monologue to a dialogue. Well, maybe you actually are. Well, why? And you start to have this conversation with yourself. So often we do, the self-limiting beliefs will often show up when we least expect them, and will hijack our day, and will create this inner voice, which usually runs on a very negative narrative. As I say, it's up to you how long you spend in that kind of mind, in that headspace before you change the channel. And that's quite often what we do with Imagery Coaching, with the organization that we work with, is we are looking at how to change the channel. Like where do you want it to go? Because it's your TV screen ultimately. It's your head. Where do you want it to go? So again, where we want our thoughts to go is really around purpose, and like, why are we doing this? And this kind of leads me on to, in a way, I've alluded to, functional imagery training, which is the research battery behind this. Is we have limiting beliefs all the time, and we're talking about business, but we have them in our day-to-day life, right? We have it. I can't run. I can't exercise because I'm not like that. Oh, you know what? I can't really eat healthy this weekend because I've got lots on, and we create these excuses. And it happens all the time. And that's okay. But again, it's up to you to change the channel. And that's really important for us as psychologists, as coaches, as business leaders, is we can support our team, our employees, and our leaders to change that channel.
So before we get into functional imagery training, I love this, the acronym FIT, which you document in the choice point, and also you allude to leveraging 7 senses, which I'm really curious to get into, to kind of alleviate the panic within our listeners now. What I'm hearing is we all have negative thoughts. Is it right to say we're wired to have negative thoughts? Because ultimately assessing danger out there is, from an evolutionary perspective, has kept us safe. So we have a negativity bias, let's say, but it requires a level of self-awareness to understand that you've stayed on that negativity channel for a little bit too long and you now need to switch the channel. So before we get into the functional imagery training piece, is what I'm saying correct, that the negative thoughts in themselves aren't necessarily dangerous and going to derail us? It's the length of time we spend in that state of negativity.
Spot on. Yeah. So we see in the research that around 80% of our thoughts are negative, and that's kind of that's obviously a huge figure, but we do get to choose that balance. We do get to be back in balance with the way that we're thinking. Also, the other stat that which kind of worries me a little bit is 95% of today's thoughts will be the same as tomorrow. So knowing that, we can surely inject effort into creating different habits or different thoughts based on our goals. So don't think these stats are fixed. They're not fixed in stone. It's not like the Testament and they're carved in stone. These are whiteboard stats. You can wipe them off and you can reshape them based on your outlook. So, yeah.
It's really alarming, isn't it, whenever you think that for the vast majority of us, we're walking around replaying the past if 95% of our thoughts are actually the same, and that 80% of those are negative. So the opportunity here exists for leaders to buck this, to be self-aware, number one, that this is going on, and that actually by leveraging your methodology, that we can actually change the channel, and ultimately, given the stats around scaling and the limited number that are actually achieving scaling, that we have a great opportunity here as leaders to imagine a much brighter future and actually stay on that channel. So you've kind of teased us with the functional imagery training. What is this, Jon?
So in a nutshell, it is motivational interviewing plus imagery training. So what does that mean? It's empathetic communication. So thinking about how to connect with other people, but also understanding what makes them tick as well. So lots of people will join a business because they have some intrinsic kind of value based on the organization. And then they'll get, in the day-to-day swing of things, and they may lose their passion, they may lose whatever it could be. So really, it's about tapping into this intrinsic motivation and being able to connect individuals to stay on their course for as long as possible. Now, this comes back to values, and I'm sure lots of people talk about values in lots of different ways. And there are two things here for motivational interviewing. To when we start off using the approach, is to understand where your values show up on your calendar. Let's
get into this, because the values, the word values is used lots in business. Yeah. And I don't want to take it for granted that everyone listening understands immediately. Oh, yes, I know what my values are, and here's my 7 values, and this is how it directs my day. So just share with the listeners what you mean by values, given the importance in the context of motivational interviewing, because I want to kind of ensure that we don't give the listeners too much jargon, but really break this down practically. So what are values? If I was to ask you, Jon, what are your values, and how what are they, and how have you gone about finding out your values?
I think in a nutshell, you can look at where someone spends their money, and where someone spends their time. I mean, you could do lots of different tasks, but often, like for me this morning, woke up and went for a run. Why is that important to me? Because my value is health. To keep healthy, so I can keep active with my young family. Okay, so it's on my calendar. It happens. It shows up. Where do I spend my money? Probably on too much running kit, if I'm honest. But that's not the point. The point is that you can look at your hobbies. You can look at things that actually refresh you, things that relax you as well. They could be values-based activities. Now, just to kind of partition, we have our own intrinsic values, which are what makes you tick. Whether it's clearly this is one of your values is probably curiosity and education, to inspire other people and to share knowledge. That's a value that I hold very close to my heart as well. So you personify that value and you put it into action. When you go to an organization, they may say, our value is courage. Okay, well, what does that mean to me? Where does it show up on my calendar? Where does it show up on my day? So rather than inheriting values, and I work with the military, I work with lots of different places where they inherit values. These ultimately may not be values that you hold true to you personally, but you walk into an environment and you need to then connect your personal values to an organization's values as well. So this is synergy between individual, employee, and organization and their values is really, really, really important. Now, a lot of our research is focused on one-to-one interventions. This is really team-based work, which is a little bit different.
Okay, let me stop there. Okay, just so the values piece, I get that. That's so practical, makes so much sense for listeners. If you want to understand your values, look at your calendar, look at where you're spending your time, where you've scheduled to spend your time, and look at what you're spending your money on. If you're buying a lot of health magazines, well, then clearly one of your values is health. If you spend a lot of time, in the gym, again, one of your values is health. If you spend a lot of time scheduling time at the weekends where you clear out all your work and you just spend that time with family, clearly one of your values is family. If you travel a lot, clearly one of your values is maybe experiences, and that's where you're spending your money. So I absolutely get that. The motivational interviewing then, in the context of those listening who are both employees and leaders, employers, where does the connection come where we actually achieve this magic, this synergy, this alignment between my values as a person and the values of this organization that I'm about to walk into?
Absolutely. So motivational interviewing in its heart is really focused on your why. Why are you here? Why this organization? So unpicking that is really key. And motivational interviewing is a conversational style, and it's been born out of thousands of research projects really focusing on things like addiction, but also now it's gone into cravings, it's gone into healthcare, and it's working also in organizations. Motivational interviewing is really quite prevalent because it's how we connect with our employees. It's how we connect with individuals, because we share understanding. We share this ability to connect through empathy, which is really based on reflective listening, like listening to really understand rather than just to talk back to someone. Also, it's about being super open and accepting people where they are and their level of change or whatever their values could be. So really for us, we can get onto loads of different overlapping research around thriving, which is kind of the same thing. It's about being open. It's about really being understanding the individual and then connecting with them through their values.
So making it super practical, Jon.
Yeah.
And I always aim to have these podcasts almost like mini masterclasses. For those leaders of organizations who are maybe interviewing people in 2024, what one or two questions can they introduce into their candidate interviews, which will really get to the heart of the congruence, the alignment between the employees' values and the organization's values?
Oh wow, that's a heck of a question. Okay, so I've kind of been thinking about this a lot, weirdly, and the best question to ask, in my view, my very humble view, is who's your role model? Because that'll expose values, an understanding of future self and identity, and it gives you a kind of a litmus of where someone is based on aspirations. So Yeah, I think that's the one question I would think would reveal the most is around role models. And again, thinking about imagery wise as well, often you say, well, this is where I want to be. I want to be at this pinnacle. I want to be like this person because of all these things. And this is kind of where I am. And there's a gap in between. And understanding what that gap is really important for growth and progress and for how you're shaping your attitude to learn more and be more curious.
So let's get into this. I love this. I kind of have to, in my own head, put things in a kind of in a structure. So I understand the values, and you've given me great clarity on that. The context of motivational interviewing, which is really teasing out that congruence between my values and the organization's values. And ultimately, from a scaling perspective, we want that, the more alignment we get between what we're doing as an organization, our values as an organization, and those people that make up the organization, then actually the higher probability there will be of us achieving scale. This is me kind of anecdotally saying this. Yeah. Then we bring in the imagery part of this, and I love this. Just before we get into kind of the how-to and why this is important, in your experience, how many leaders, when you ask that question, who do you want to become in 3 years' time? What does life look like for you in 3 years' time? What does this business look like in 3 years' time? Describe this to me, Mr. Leader. How many people actually can articulate back to you in great pixelation the image that they have of their future selves and the future organization?
It's pretty vivid, and it's the majority of people. So I whenever I go into these kind of things and ask questions like this, I'm always mindful that they may say, I've got no idea. And I don't really have any role model at all. That does happen, but it's a rarity. It's a real rarity. And actually the detail in which people have thought about their future and what it may look like, not just for themselves and the organization, but also for their families as well. So some people may say, I want to take over this. I want to create a merger with this other company. Well, how will that impact? Tell me a bit about how it's going to impact you as an individual, and then your organization and your employees and their families. And they'll be really vivid with it, and they'll say, well, it's going to require a lot of logistics conversation. It's going to be very awkward conversations, but I'm going to have to. I'm going to have to think about how we can do this as a team and how we can be all on the same page together and how we can envision this together as well. So again, having those conversations with leaders, often they will be very vivid in the detail in which they feedback.
That's really interesting, because I've always found that it takes quite a number of questions to get them to, I suppose, to provoke an image of the future. And actually very, very few have communicated that vision of the future to their organization. They may harbor it up here. They may struggle with articulating it eloquently and vividly, and very, very few have actually communicated it publicly is what I've found. Getting into the how to, because as we come into 2024, and this forms a big part of our own work in the context of the second principle, purpose and vision, that ability to envision a brighter, better future for everyone, and a future where you're making even a greater impact with your wonderful product or service, is so critically important to inspire the third principle, which is people. People want to be inspired. In order to get people to follow you and to come on board, actually, we found it's critically important that you inspire them around a vision of the future. So can you take us through the process of actually the Imagineering, this functional imagery training?
Yeah, of course. No, and I think that's your first thing. I think you're right. When you talk to a business leader, like for me, they can verbalize it, but they'll struggle to verbalize it to other, or they may say, I haven't even verbalized it to other people. How am I going to communicate that? It's a huge plan. Okay, well, we need to now create some kind of visual, as in like a vision board almost, to be able to put down a timeline, get out, pretty much get out a calendar, but also, often we use a calendar and a whiteboard to sketch things out. So that's kind of how it would look in practice. But I appreciate that often people will use visual imagery. So they'll say, like, when you talk about vision and you see what the future will be like. Now, this is the important part with all the functional imagery training and all the research. And if we're going to, take one thing away from today, which we'll talk about later on, I'm sure, but is you have 7 senses. So if you're saying, for example, okay, so it will look like this. We're going to be based here, and this is how I see it.
I have to bring you
Oh,
back. You've said 7 senses.
I'll
every one of us will be familiar with 5: sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch.
Yeah.
I can't let you go past
okay.
the. What are the other 2?
2 extras. So these are the most important ones, weirdly, because so the other 2, to answer your question first, is movement and emotion. Now, I would see, and again, I use, I'm a cognitive psychologist, so I use different techniques for different people. But often, visual imagery, which is only one sense, of course, is the gateway that opens up other senses. So if you're saying, and I often do this with teams, and I'll say, what does a high performance organization look like to you? And I'll say, oh, it looks like, we're all sat around the table and we're all sharing ideas. What does it sound like to you? What does it smell like to you? What are you eating? What are you tasting? What are you smelling? And what happened in this point is people start to immerse themselves and elaborate in detail around this future self. And of course, we can say, what are you doing? How are you moving? I'm sat down, but actually I'm standing up. I get up and I'm going to go to the board and we're going to talk about things, and I'm gesturing. Okay. And how do you feel at this point? Well, I feel like me. I feel like I'm in control. I feel like, hang on a second, we've got multisensory imagery using all 7 senses. Now, this is the game changer, because visual imagery will get you so far. We know that visual imagery alone, it is helpful, but multisensory imagery is 5 times more effective at helping you achieve your goals. We have several papers that prove that. And that's really important to us as well.
Oh, you're blowing my mind here, Jon. I love this. So visual imagery is the gateway to opening up the other senses, which ultimately, if we leverage those other senses, that image becomes 5 times more effective in terms of the probability of us actually realizing that image. Is that what we're saying?
No, as in achieving your goal.
As achieving your goal will ultimately, so your goal will. What I'm saying there, we're saying the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
The vision for me is the goal. Here's correct. What I want to achieve in the future. So, so just again, and apologies for making this really simple. The visual imagery piece. Mm-hmm. You say, well, that's the gateway. What does that look like practically for people coming to this for the first time? So that ultimately give people the door to open, first of all, into this room of the other senses, which ultimately is going to lead to a higher probability of them achieving their goal. What is that initially? What's step 1 here?
There is, as you're right. There are several steps to actually being able to achieve this. We focus primarily. I'm going to focus primarily on imagery, right? So the first thing to be really mindful of, everyone imagines differently. That's really, really, really important. So some people may not be visual imagers. So that's called aphantasia. Some people may suffer from aphantasia, which is, you say to them, can you imagine what the future will be like? And they'll say, no. What? Can you not imagine what, being sat in the boardroom would be like, and you're doing a presentation? No, I can't imagine that at all. No. Oh, okay. So they would need more of a diagram, or they need to kind of explore things first before they can experience that future self. So the starting point really is figuring out how you imagine. And there are lots of different tests that you can take on our website at imagerycoaching.com. You can go and take the test and figure out what you're like in terms of your imagery ability. And if you score low, and again, it's in the book as well in the choice point, but if you score low, that's okay, because we can train it. So you may actually be more auditory based. So for me, I'm really auditory based. So I'll often I'll hear a sound and it will trigger the visual image, which will then trigger a smell, which will then trigger my emotion. So it could be. I'm just thinking like the example that I often use with the actual working example we used with a CEO once was he's doing a big meeting, and he's talking through, and it literally is talking through future plans of the organization, what they've done well this quarter, what they need to work on, and he's got his slide deck all prepped, all ready to go, and he adds a slide in the last minute and tells his team, put the slide in, make sure the slide's in there. When you run it through, you can make sure it's all there fine. And of course, the slide's not there when you go through the presentation. But what he's done is he's imagined in great detail what it would be like if the slide's in, and how to manage his emotion, the responses of the audience, of all the employees. But actually, he starts with, for him, he'll start with the sound of the room, how people are murmuring. And that will then evoke a visual response, which will then evoke a more smell-based response. What does the room smell like? And then it evokes another response, which is usually emotion. And emotion for us is really key as well, because emotion will drive you to be more committed. Committed is very different to motivation. To be more committed to work towards your goal. Why is that? Because it's literally merged with your purpose, it's merged with your why. So emotion's really key. Now, controlling your emotion in those circumstances for that CEO, because he'd already planned it in his head and gone through what might happen, the challenges, the struggles, the obstacles, the great success, he planned things out in a realistic way. He was able to manage his emotion. He was able to manage the stress of the environment, and he also was able, not just imagined, but able to stay in best self during the presentation. So imagery is really quite key for how you communicate, but also how you plan and perceive the future.
There's a couple of things. I want to share the link, if I may, with your imagery test to all of our listeners. We put that into the show notes. I've never heard of this before. In terms of this is a podcast first that we all imagine in different ways, and there's a sense of this certainly within our own 12-month program. We take participants through a process to craft their vision. And I'm a big believer in marinating in material in different ways. So we share our own book, other reading literature. I had an image of this podcast today sparked by the article that I read in HBR. I'm a big believer in reading lots of different material, getting curious around lots of different material. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I watch a lot of YouTube interviews. I enjoy the YouTube material. So we can imagine things in different ways, or certainly we learn in different ways, or certainly our imagination is triggered in different ways, from an auditory perspective, from a visual perspective, kinesthetically, in terms of getting tactile. Can you speak to that? But before we get into that, what are some of the ways for those people listening who struggle to imagine a future that they can actually begin to, I suppose, get this door opened into the other senses? Practically, what should they explore doing? Assuming they take the test.
So familiarization is really key as well. So if you're not, if you're thinking about a future goal that obviously you haven't achieved yet, then connecting with someone who's worked towards a similar goal, achieved a similar goal, or even take a photograph of something and then immerse yourself in that, very visceral experience where you can then go, well, I haven't, it could be, I want to move to the Italian Alps or whatever, and I want to work from there and have whatever. Take a photograph, and what would it be like when you're there, when you're in those hills, when you're people around you, conversations, the birds flying, I don't know, whatever. Immerse yourself in the detail. And that's really important to also think about with how you're going to set your goals, because your goals, as soon as you imagine a goal, hey, you're going to activate your imagination. There's the other thing as well. We started talking about self-limiting beliefs, and really how you talk to yourself, the self-talk, links to how you imagine. So in a nutshell, really focus in on what language you're using, your affirmations to yourself, but also how you're enabling yourself to change the channel to be able to focus on specific goals. Hope I've answered your question there.
Absolutely. Again, mind's racing here. I want to go back to something you said right at the start. You used, you brought up in one of the questions the application of a visions board, and that aligns to what you're suggesting here in terms of get a photograph of the goal that you aspire to achieve. Can you share with our listeners a little bit more about vision boards? Or clearly, you advocate vision boards. For those who are familiar with this, they're likely familiar with the law of attraction and manifesting and the use of vision boards around that. So, can you speak to that a little bit more, Jon?
Of course, yeah, sure. I always think vision boards are really a practical way to be held accountable to our milestones. So I think about vision boards being as a timeline. So you can write a long line, for example, on a big whiteboard. At the end, you have your goal. So whatever it could be to achieve a certain, maybe it's a numbered goal, maybe it's a goal around, mergers, whatever it could be. Also, you must go beyond the goal, right? What happens beyond your goal? What happens next? So don't just think about it being a structured line. That's it. You're done. You've achieved your goal. Congratulations. There's a handshake and there's a lovely glass of champagne. What happens beyond that? What happens the day after, the week after? So a vision board should go beyond your goal as well. And then, of course, you've got your what we would call milestones from achieving your goal all the way back to today, where you are now. Sometimes people use vision boards to go into the past as well, to look at all of our past successes. It depends on who you're working with and what the goals are really, but also things that are hugely targets. We use different language. We have a big goal, we have our milestones along the route, different points in time, and they could have pictures on it as well in terms of what would it be like on a halfway point. Maybe our goal is 3 years, a 3-year goal. So we might think of our being 18 months in. Okay, 18 months in, what does that look like? What does the halfway point look like to us? What does it feel like to us? What does it sound like to us? Let's immerse ourselves in that experience. And then we have our targets along that route. What are we going to do to help us achieve those goals? What are we all doing? And what the important point is also with vision boards especially is to put your team accountable to certain targets. So it could be targets around creating a sales funnel. What does that look like? Where would that be on our timeline? Who's accountable to it? Who's responsible for it? 2 different words, 2 different things, of course, as well. So that's how we would timeline using a vision board. Other places may just use a calendar. And they might get a huge calendar out, and they'll go, right, let's explore what the dates and where things could happen, and let's set targets around these calendars. Another great idea. The important point with using functional imagery training for this purpose is that for every target, for every milestone, for everything that you planned on that route, it can't always be about success, right? Because life gets in the way, randomness happens, the market fluctuates. So it's also got to have different timelines. And this is the important point with imagery. Imagery isn't one timeline. It isn't like you're going to achieve success. Congratulations, there's a handshake and your champagne. It is, there's going to be obstacles along the way. There's going to be red tape. There's going to be things you need to overcome. Let's put that on our vision board. And let's imagine that as well. We also think about what it would be like. And this is slightly controversial in our approach, which I think is why it works so effectively. Because we also explore what it would be like if we don't achieve our goal. Okay, well, here's our end goal. It's 3 years' time. What if we don't achieve it? Like that's realistic, right? As you said at the start, a lot of organizations, a lot of companies, SMEs fail. That's cool. We appreciate that. Okay, let's experience that. What would it be like if we didn't do very well? If we weren't here in three years' time, like what would it be like? I mean, that thought contrasted with a positive thought is really motivational, right? Because you don't want to have that negative thought. But also, the important point for vision boarding in this way is you've relatively experienced failure, and you've done it on your terms. It's not going to spontaneously emerge and create this self-limiting belief, right? Well, not as such, but you've done it on your terms. and you then put in a plan which is realistic. And what we find is when you do this process of contrasting negative outcome and positive outcome, creating different timelines based on your vision board, that creates more realistic goals. People feel more inspired to work towards their goal. They feel much more connected because they've all had a say in that process, and that activates the team. And that's really important as well, an activation. Now, as I say, you want to experience that process in as much multi-sensory detail as possible to really get that connection with your team, but also to make the goal more realistic as well.
Yeah, as I say, I love this. There's a number of things. One, just to share with you, my wife took out her vision journal last night from 2018, and she said, look at this. And it was a picture of the steps of Sarah Jessica Parker's house in Sex and the City.
Right.
And we were there a week ago, and she had a photograph at the bottom of those steps. It was exactly the same, obviously exactly the same, but she said, this is what I put in here in 2018. Oh. And she never suggested going to New York for Christmas. The kids had suggested it, and we said, yeah, let's do that. And one of the afternoons, myself and my wife, the kids were off doing their thing, and we took a walk towards that area and stumbled across the steps. And so I'm a big believer in the power of visualization. Something you said there in terms of the envisioning what it might look like if you don't reach the goal aligns to what Professor Damien Hughes had said when I had him on the podcast way back a number of years ago in season 1. He said the importance of actually, after visualizing what you want, is actually conducting a pre-mortem, going through that exercise of visualizing the challenges, the hurdles that you're likely to encounter along the way, so that they won't be a surprise when they arrive, and ultimately you can galvanize, rally your team around actually solutions prior to those challenges ever happen, because you've already visualized some of the roadblocks, the impediments along the way.
Exactly. And I think that also makes teams a lot more adaptable as well, because they're able to think about being flexible. This was our goal, but actually the reality is that it's going to take us a lot more effort, a lot more hard work to get to that point. So I think doing that approach of imagining the struggles which we will have, the challenges, the failures, and I appreciate that along that route of success, there's 50 shades of success, and along that route is a lot of learning. So you can always go back to it. And the point of vision boards also is you can always go back to it and change it. Like it's not in stone. It's not carved in stone. It is on a whiteboard. You can rub it off and you can tweak it. And that's really important as well. But just to go back to another thing as well around, you mentioned things around manifestation. Now, that's in that area, and what we're doing in terms of functional imagery training, it links. Yes, it links. It hugely links. We've got a future goal. We're using affirmations, and we're connecting. What we're doing is we are connecting with other people. And I think this is a really, that's a really key point, is that when you connect with more people, when you share your goals, we're not relying on the law of attraction or some kind of cosmic whatever. We're relying on you to go out and make an opportunity. We're relying on you to actually change your mindset based on your attitude. And I said right at the start, mindset's overrated, and it is overrated because it's really about what are you going to do. You may feel like you could fail at something. That's okay. That's a mindset. Mindset is, I may not be able to achieve this goal. It's really about attitude, ruthlessness, audacity to go, you're right, I may not be able to do this, but I'm going to inject effort. The attitude's about what you do in your environment, how you face the world. And I think that's a really key point. And, a lot of my earlier research in probably 2006 actually was around mindset. And it's a term that, you clearly you can measure mindset and you can look at changing mindset, but does it actually change the dial with performance? Not really, but attitude does. How you think and how you behave are the key points in how you use your vision boards, whatever you do, to be able to work towards your goal. And that goes much more beyond, that goes far beyond any kind of manifestation or anything else like that. And also bearing in mind that we're using multi-sensory imagery, and that's the game changer.
Sorry. No, again, I want to make this super practical. You're delivering so much value here, Jon, and I'm putting myself in the shoes of the listener, and also indulging myself here because we're just about to embark on our own 3-year vision. Certainly, we have that. We created our own vivid vision for the business, which culminated in this year a summit in Belfast, the first scaling summit that has ever been held in Ireland. And I interviewed Stephen Bartlett for the podcast live in front of 500 guests. Now, 3 years prior to that, there wasn't a podcast and there wasn't a company. So, and that is something that materialized through this process of visioneering. I'm curious to kind of unpack a little bit the process around vision boarding. I love the idea of the timeline. That's something new. In terms of creating your vision board, are you advocating that literally you cut things out of magazines, you take photographs, you stick them up on a board, and we do that individually in terms of creating our own personal vision? If you're the leader of a company, creating the vision for the company, and then bringing our team around that process where you're sharing, here's my vision for the future now as a team. How does that align with what you folk see the vision of this company to be, this organization to be? Can you practically speak to that process? And then does that board sit up in the office? Do we look at that every day? Do we meditate on that? What's the process of embedding that vision into our subconscious such that when we, tying this right back to the start, when we have those negative thoughts, and what I believe is that for many people, when those negative thoughts come in, they actually don't have another channel to change it to. So what and this is in my words, just what I'm hearing from you is we're creating another channel, because the channel that's already programmed there is programmed such that 80% of what you're going to hear from that channel is negative. And we need to, through Imagineering, through this training, create another channel for ourselves. So immediately when those negative thoughts come in, we can switch it to the channel and go, yes, there's what I have on the board in terms of my vision for the future. And I'm going to now create thoughts that are conducive and aligned with that vision for the future. That's a bit of a rant, but can you kind of speak to that? Is this about creating another channel?
I love it. No, I think there are two big things there. So your channel already exists. Your channel already exists, so it's not creating a new one. It already exists. So it's like thinking about TV. You go from BBC One to BBC Two, and then that's not very good. Let's go to Channel 4. That's no better. Okay, Sky. It's gone to. So what you need to do is you need to create some form of guide, right? Where do you want your thoughts to go? And that's really what we do is. Within Imagery Coaching, we are the guides. We are your mentors that support you to be able to understand what your guidebook looks like, what channels are available to you. What do you not want? I do not want kids TV. Okay, fine, that's fine. You can change the channel. That's fine. So your channels already exist in a way because your goals have already been semi-formulated. And what we do is we help you to get more clarity around your goal and how that might occur. So the first part really is it's up to you. What we do is we support you to create a guide or a menu, like an a la carte. I want that and that and that, and I'm going to be able to imagine this in detail. I love the term also. I'm not sure whether you're doing it on purpose, but when you're talking about Imagineering, I mean that's a big term, right? I think Pixar that term years ago, but going from being more visionary based to imaginary based, and because bearing in mind vision, people think about it's one thing, right? You're visualizing this thing. We're Imagineering, right? We are creating, we are shaping emotion, we are creating and we are shaping how we're going to be able to look, feel, sound in the future. And that's really, really important, and how we shape the future of what we're doing. So I think, that's kind of what we do is we help you to create those understanding of the channels. But going back to your another question there as well, which was really about vision boarding. And how do you vision board? Do you do it on your own? Does a leader vision board first and then integrate the team? Often that happens, yes. So often we are pulled into a company as consultants to work with a company who's got an idea of what they want. Often we're called in to say, sustainability is really key and we want to limit our carbon footprint. Okay, brilliant. How are we going to get it? How are we going to get there? Well, we've got an understanding of carbon capture and we've got, okay, cool. Let's plot it down. Let's see what that looks like on a whiteboard or whatever we might use on a Canva thing or whatever. And we plan it all out. But the important point, if you want to connect your team and to inspire your team, is to be inclusive when creating vision boards, or let's call them Imagineering boards. And this is really important because they will feel more connected, which will make them more accountable, makes employees more accountable. So they must be part of the process. People do not want to inherit KPIs. I know I go into companies, people say, please don't use the word KPI. It gives me the chills. So, okay, what do you prefer? Explore. We're going to explore. Okay, so some people may not like to use the term SMART goals. Oh, I hate SMART goals. Too specific, it limits me. There is research. There's lots of research. Christian Swan is the lead person on this. On people often don't like SMART goals. They like to explore, and I think that's what a lot of organisations do. They say, some say we need to achieve this goal, a very specific, measurable outcome. Some people, especially in sustainability, say, let's just start. Let's figure out the route as we're going. Let's shape our vision board as we're learning. We've got no idea what we're going to, what the carbon, or the endpoint is going to be in terms of our ability to save energy, whatever it could be. But let's just start and let's integrate a team. Let's get some champions of sustainability together. Let's start the conversations as an organization, with your C-suite around you, with all your kind of leaders around you, but with the people who are actually, in the trenches every day, the employees who do care. They're working for your organization because they care about what you're doing. So creating that very active, connected culture and visioning or imagining together is really, really, really important. Making it inclusive will motivate and will commit you towards what are generally tricky, challenging goals.
Yeah, question I love to ask, certainly when I'm coaching on a one-to-one basis and through our program, is what does great look like? So in 12 months time, in 24 months time, 36 months time, what does great look like? And reverse engineer from there. Likewise, I'm not a fan of KPIs. A methodology that we use is from John Doerr. It was actually originated by Andy Grove from Intel as objectives and key results. So asking team members to create their objectives for the next 90 days aligned to what great looks like, aligned to that vision of the future, so that they have that flexibility, that autonomy to create an objective and then identify key results. Well, okay, that's the objective. We want to reduce costs by 3%. We want to become more profitable. Let's say everyone understands profitability. We want to become more profitable, which will allow us to reinvest those profits into a new facility in 2 years' time. And that's given context and to a KPI, which is reduce costs by 3% next quarter. The objective gives context aligned to an overall vision of what we want to achieve in 3 years' time, which is, to create this new super facility, but actually we need to reinvest profits in order to create that facility. So I'm a big fan of, not a fan of KPIs, big fan of objectives and key results. In your language, it's that kind of allowing people that, empowering people to be autonomous with their view of what they can do, aligned to what great looks like. There's a number of things that you've referenced along the way here. Adaptability was one. What else can we do? And I love that idea of kind of identifying kind of, what failure might look like here, which will which will create a level of adaptability in our teams. What else can we do to create that adaptability? Do you use adaptability and resilience interchangeably, Jon? Do you think of the two of them, similarly?
Gosh, in a way. I mean, because I research in this area, it's all very clear lanes of how people are working and researching. Adaptability for me is really about understanding what might happen, and then having a plan B, and then a C, and a D, and then maybe we haven't got a plan. That's okay. And also planning for that moment of, okay, we've had a catastrophe. It wasn't anyone's fault. Let's try and figure out a way. Try and figure out a way around it. We use a lot of, organizations have their own language, which we try to accommodate when we work with them. And it could be huddles, weekly huddles that we all go around the table, and everyone's got a voice, or a round table, and we go, right, what's come in, what's new, what do we know, what do we not know, what's our competitors doing, and also when you want to pull the ripcord of the panic button, right? Something's happened and I'm not sure what it is, and having that ability, I think that for me is really about resilience. Then having that ability to say, I'm going to put my hand up because it doesn't feel right, or the numbers have come in, and I need some help. And so having that, and I think this is really, resilience again is often used in organizations as personal resilience. Are you resilient to bounce back and to overcome whatever? And actually, organizational resilience is really where we need to be focusing in on. Like, what, individuals come in to our companies and they are resilient. They are already resilient. And we need to make sure that we support them to maintain that level of resilience. So it's organizational. And, the two things that I always see with that in mind, organizational resilience, especially talking about how it fits within employees, is challenge and support. If challenge is too high, this work is far too high for me, I don't understand it, and you're not supported, then you'll likely not enjoy what you're doing and you'll burn out. Likewise, you want to have that level of challenge being really high, but also support being mutual as well. You need that connection, that conversation. So creating strategies, which are really functional ways. You can go from all the theory and then say, all right, great, this is great theory, but how do we actually use this? Weekly meetings where we do check-ins, team meetings, reviews of our vision boards, reviews of our milestones or objectives. And these can't be reviews that are randomized. You need to make sure that reviews occur all the time. And there's a lovely thing that I like as a organization we worked with a couple of years ago, and he had weekly gratitude meetings on a Friday. And they were in his diary. Whatever happened, he would always be there. It was a weekly meeting. It wasn't spontaneous. Let's do it every quarter. We've forgotten to do it. It was part of their culture. It was part of who they were, to say thank you, but also to say, okay, who's struggling this week? I'm struggling. All right, well, who can support? Has anyone got the skill set to support you? Yeah, so and so has. Fantastic collaboration. And again, what would happen is they're a team that are all connected. And this was really interesting for us because they retain talent. One of the big things at the moment is retention of talent. That organization in particular, purely around gratitude meetings. I mean, clearly there are lots of other things going on as well in terms of the culture, but gratitude meetings was what the CEO said was one of the things that he would never move in his diary. Was really, really important for that team culture. But also it retained talent because everyone felt like they were understood. They felt that it was a room to share. They were open, and it created a thriving based, resilient environment.
Yeah, look, this resonates so strongly. Something we do within our own business now, Simple Scaling, and the previous business of which I was CEO of. On the Monday mornings, we have our Monday morning check-in, what we call, our calibration meeting. So we open that meeting. Somebody guides some box breathing, 5-6 minutes of box breathing. We then go around the room. We share our gratitudes. The person who's chairing the meeting will share 3 gratitudes with some pictures, typically family, health, whatever it may be that they're grateful for, and everyone else shares one of their gratitudes. And then we move into our objectives and key results in terms of our progress, whoever's chairing the meeting will share their progress against their objectives and key results for the quarter. We will ask for any help. Who needs help this week to support their own individual OKRs, and we'll close the meeting with a shout out. So that's the weekly calibration meeting. Get everybody aligned after the weekend, and there is a transition after the weekend. You know, we've spent time with family, we've had some downtime. It's unrealistic to think that we can kind of just, you know, shift back into gear where we left off kind of last Wednesday or Thursday when we were at our peak momentum, that we can pick up there on Monday morning. It's just unrealistic. So we have this calibration meeting, and then on a Friday we have our celebration. So the last communication we have as a team on a Friday is an email from everyone sharing their wins of the week. Again, wins aligned to their own OKRs, and everyone goes into the weekend, regardless of what has happened during the week. And, you know, there'll be challenges as there are every week. We're all going into the weekend feeling buoyed by the fact that we're making progress. So calibration, celebration is the cadence that we have set within our own business, and it's so critically important. And what I've heard throughout this, and I've just loved this, I'm conscious of time, and I want to move into the close, but address something before we do. What I'm hearing, look, it's so critically important for leaders to imagine a brighter, better future. Leverage the 7 senses to do that, and critically important in that is to become emotionally connected to that vision of the future. Practically, we can construct vision boards with clear timelines, bring our team together so there's this inclusivity, there's this, you know, it's not just my picture of the future. Everybody has lifted the paintbrush and had a go on the canvas, so it becomes our picture of the future. Yeah. And then operationalize that through, for us, it's OKRs. Just to kind of underpin all of that, what should we do practically? You know, you mentioned you've come from a run this morning, you know, clearly a healthy guy. You're keeping in shape. We know the importance of movement and exercise, and, you know, to kind of change our emotional state. But what should we do? What practices should we embed in our daily routines to undergird the ability to tune into the channel, to remove any interference or static when you're trying to change that channel?
Brilliant. Yeah, and you know what? I want to come work with you. It sounds like a great, you know, team meeting. It's fantastic. And I think, you know, it's something that came out of that, of what you said just there also just triggered, you know, and again, links to this question is box breathing, you know, breathing exercises. Breathing is what you have on you all the time. And that's a really good way to start off your day or your routine or your practice, whatever you're doing, to try to reset or rethink or refocus on what's important to you. And in teams, you know, you say people come into meetings, people may have rushed in, people may have been there for a while, and, you know, and breathing is a really good way for us all to become synced. So that's the key thing for us also is, you know, we can focus on goal setting, we focus on lots of different things, but really it's about recognizing I'm not on the channel I want to be on. Okay, what can I do about it? Breathing is often the first thing. Have a deep breath in and have a deep breath out, and just allow that process to be very deliberate. And that's called a cue. Cue is a deliberate process, a behavioral thing that you do that reminds you to stay in best self. Slightly differently from a cue, a trigger. Triggers happen all around us, right? We smell something and we're triggered to, you know, to think about food, or it could be someone said something and you were triggered. A cue is deliberate. You plan it. It's very deliberate in terms of how you're going to, what you're going to think next. So for me in the morning, for example, and there are lots of cues. I have lots of cues. For me in the morning, my feet touch the floor. As my feet touch the floor, that's my cue to then imagine my day. And I go through my day in my head, and I use multisensory imagery to play that out. And of course, in my day, there are going to be obstacles and challenges and struggles and setbacks and childcare and all the other things that go with it, of course. And I would, you know, almost plan that out in as much detail as possible. And then what I do when I finish that kind of process is I then stick to one thing. I do one thing. It could be send that email that I need to send. It could be go for the run. Usually for me, I actually plan the day before. So, you know, in the evening, like yesterday evening, you know, kit's all ready. It's all out. I'm committed. That's it. I'm going. So again, have that process, have that deliberate process, and it's activated from a cue. So it could be, end of the day, I quite like in terms of my last cue of the day usually is I'm working and I've got till 7 o'clock whatever in the evening. I'm sending emails, and okay, when my laptop closes, that's my cue. I'm done. Now I can be present with my family. Okay, and feeling present is again one of my core values because I'm a family person. To be present. What does that mean to me? It means I'm going to go and immediately, send a message to my wife. It could whatever it could be. So that is the process: is to use a cue, to use imagery, and then to do something immediately, implement some kind of change. So I think you can do that anywhere, right? You probably have 101 things that you could use to implement changes based on cues and using imagery.
Oh, John, I could keep you here all day. I just love this conversation. I love this topic. I'm just fascinated with all things mind related. We didn't get into kind of frequencies and resonance, but I truly believe that when we're tuning, moving from the negative channel to the positive channel, when you're there, you attract others who are also tuned into that channel. Because the people that I always hear, the challenge levied at me is I can't get the people. And when I invite the person who's saying that to go onto their website, to have a look at the future that they have painted, for example, on the website, on social media, which is where a lot of the generation now who are in the workplace are looking, first of all, to be inspired about this workplace. There's nothing on there that suggests a better future for a potential candidate. And this for me is so critically important that you get onto that channel and understand that you create, or you ultimately expand your surface area of luck, to use a phrase from Daniel Priestley, of attracting the right people into your organization who are going to support you in the execution of the vision that you have to create in the first instance and share publicly. So I'm really passionate about this. You've worked with some incredible people, incredible organizations across the globe. In closing, can you share with us 3 timeless takeaways?
Of course, yeah. I think the first one is an obvious one, is 7 senses. So when you're imagining individually or in a team, slow down and elaborate on the detail using as many as possible. We say 7 senses. The more you can use, the better. If you're using 3, 4, that's fine. But the detail is really, really key. That's the first one, is ensure you're using multi-sensory imagery where possible. The second is, with a lot of organizations, we'll always focus, as we said today, on don't just think about success, also think about the failure as well. You spoke about luck, and luck is really hard work and opportunity merged together in a nutshell. And and the more you practice, the more you try at certain things, the luckier you become. So really, for us all, it's about that hard work as well as being able to shape that narrative. And narrative is the third part. The third part really for us is you have an opportunity to shape your narrative. And the opportunity to shape your narrative and how you change the channel takes a couple of seconds. So all it takes. And that ability to really think, where do I want my thoughts to go? You control. You have the remote control. You have it in your hand. And being and understanding that process. It could be from journaling. Could be journal and say, this is what I want it to look like. This is what I want to imagine. This is the detail. And you can write it all down. And then when the opportunity arises, when you think, I want to change the channel, recognize, take a deep breath in, take a deep breath out, and change it. Change it on your terms. A couple of seconds is all it takes. And you're back in control of the steering wheel.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Jon, I have really, really enjoyed the last 75 minutes or so. It's been a real pleasure to have you on today. It's I've indulged myself, so I hope that's been useful for the listeners, because this has been I've been completely immersed in this. What's next for you?
Yes, we do a lot of work abroad these days. A lot of our work is in the US. So although we are working with a lot of GB companies, a lot of our work is based in New York, randomly, with companies struggling, aspiring, and really for us all, it's for us as an organisation, at Imagery Coaching, we're about human connection. We're really about that human connection and enabling people to imagine in great depth and detail, because that's where the magic happens, is in your imagination. And research. A lot of it is research as well, which isn't as attractive as other things, but there you go.
Well, it's been an absolute joy to connect with you today. For others who have been listening to this and want to connect with you, Jon, which I no doubt they will, where best to reach you?
Yes, so imagerycoaching.com is the best place to find us. We're on Instagram, we're everywhere. I think we are everywhere, on LinkedIn and all sorts of places. But give us if you want to follow us, if you want to do the imagery test, again, it's on the website. Coaching courses are all on the website, and you can find us there.
Jon, I wish you every success. I'm off now to do your imagery test. Looking forward to that. Have a wonderful day. I wish you all the best. Your work is really, really important, and best wishes, best luck with your new book as well, The Choice Points. So take care.
Thank you very much.